Hey guys, tonight we are stepping softly into the creaking floorboard, stove warmed, radio humming, lamp lit, supper stretching, sock darning, newspaper rustling, coal scuttle hauling, dishwater steaming, bill hiding, porch sitting, bathwater sharing, button saving, father listening, mother not sitting down yet world of a normal American home in the 1930s, where evening does not simply mean relaxing, because apparently relaxation must first pass through a sink full of plates, a stove that needs coaxing like a suspicious uncle, a table where the meat has been introduced to the potatoes for moral support, a radio everyone gathers around as if a wooden box has become the most confident person in the room, and a family budget so thin it could be folded into an envelope and still make people nervous. We are not talking about every American home, every state, every city, every farm, every race, every immigrant family, every income level, every apartment, every boarding house, every Dust Bowl kitchen, every mill town, every black family navigating hardship under segregation, every Mexican-American household facing labor insecurity and discrimination, every Native family affected by federal policy and poverty, every wealthy home that managed to continue polishing silver while the rest of the country debated whether soup could be made more persuasive, or every family that experienced the Depression in exactly the same way. Because the 1930s were not one tidy living room with a lamp on a table and everyone politely taking turns being anxious. Some homes had electricity, some still relied on oil lamps. Some had indoor plumbing, some had a pump, a basin, and a very personal relationship with cold water. Some families listened to comedy programs, baseball games, Roosevelt's fireside chats, church music, dance bands, serial dramas, farm reports, and advertisements promising cheerful improvements to lives that mostly needed a paid bill and shoes that did not surrender in public. Some evenings were loving and funny. Some were tense. Some were crowded with relatives, boarders, babies, grandparents, neighbors, and one chair that had apparently been appointed by the family as a diplomatic zone. But in many homes, the evening was the hour when the whole day came inside and took off its shoes. Before we begin, you can like the video and subscribe if you enjoy drifting through the strange, ordinary, inconvenient corners of history, but only if you genuinely want to. No Depression-era aunt will appear beside your bed with a dish towel and ask whether your support for the channel is sufficiently helpful to the household, although she may silently judge how you fold it, and leave a comment telling me where you are listening from and what time it is there. There is something quietly wonderful about knowing that while someone is falling asleep in Ohio, someone else is making tea in Manila, someone in Manchester has remembered an unpaid bill with theatrical timing, and someone in Toronto is staring into the refrigerator at midnight with the same solemn hope once given to an icebox containing half an onion and a covered dish of unknown intentions. The Quiet Hours is also on Spotify, so if you prefer to listen there while drifting off, you can find it there too. Now, dim the lights, put on a fan, pull your blanket up, and get completely comfortable. Let your shoulders drop, let your jaw unclench. Let today's grocery prices, emails, laundry, weather reports, mysterious passwords, overconfident appliances, and that one drawer full of cables that may or may not belong to anything become the problem of a 1930s household trying to make supper, warmth, news, manners, soap, shoes, and patience last until morning. And before we begin, consider a few questions. How many times can a mother say there is plenty before the potatoes begin to look personally burdened? How quietly must a father read the newspaper before everyone understands there is no good news in it? How much authority can a radio have before the entire family starts facing it like a small wooden president? How many children can be washed in one evening before the bathwater files a complaint with the county? What is the correct facial expression when a neighbor drops by, just as the good cups have been hidden behind the plain ones? How long can a coal stove be expected to heat a room, cook supper, dry socks, and emotionally support the household before it asks to join a union? How many things can be mended, saved, stretched, reused, turned over, watered down, or politely ignored before the evening admits that thrift has become a full-time relative? What does it feel like to sit in a parlor that is not quite a parlor, beside furniture nobody bought new, under a lamp that makes everything look softer than it actually is, listening to a radio comedian make jokes while the adults measure tomorrow in nickels, weather, and hope? Congratulations! You have just awakened inside a normal American home in the 1930s. Supper is almost ready, the radio is warming up, Someone is already looking for a missing button, and naturally, every chair in the house has been assigned more responsibility than Congress. You come through the front door at dusk with the outside air still clinging to your coat, bringing in the smell of street dust, coal smoke, damp wool, machine oil, cut grass, or farm mud, depending on where this particular 1930s evening has placed you. The house does not receive you with quiet luxury. It receives you with hooks for coats, shoes by the wall, someone asking whether you wiped your feet, and the immediate knowledge that the workday has ended only in the poetic sense. Inside, the kitchen is already warmer than the rest of the house. The parlour is dim, the table is being cleared of school books or sewing so it can become a supper table, and everyone listens for the sounds that explain the mood of the evening. Footsteps, a cough, a slammed door, the careful quiet of bad news being carried in one pocket. This is the hour when the public world crosses the threshold and becomes domestic evidence. If you are the father coming in from a factory, a shop, a relief job, a farm field, a railroad yard, a garage, or a day spent looking for work that did not look back, your coat carries more than weather. It carries the day's verdict. The children may glance up from the table with the bright selfishness of the young, wanting to know whether you brought anything, whether you are tired enough to be cross, whether the newspaper has comics, whether supper is soon, whether the world has improved since breakfast. The adults read smaller signs. A hat placed carefully can mean restraint. Boots kicked too hard can mean anger. A lunch pail set down empty or almost untouched can start a quiet calculation. In many American homes during the Depression, the front door is not only an entrance, it is a daily test of atmosphere. It decides whether the room will loosen or stiffen, whether a joke can be risked, whether the bill on the mantel will remain invisible for another hour. If you are the mother or older daughter coming in from errands, the street, a neighbour's house, a laundry job, or a grocery counter, where credit was discussed with painful politeness, you bring your own evidence. A paper parcel tied with string, a coat damp at the shoulders, a pocket holding change that does not sound like enough, a face arranged into ordinary calm before the children can inspect it. The doorway asks everyone to become domestic again, which sounds gentle until you remember that domestic life is where most of the unfinished work has been waiting with its sleeves rolled up. Coats must be hung because floor space is not a suggestion. Shoes must be moved because mud is a kind of autobiography nobody wants tracked across the boards. If there is a mat, it has opinions. If there is no mat, the floor receives the news directly. The house itself may be rented, owned with worry, mortgaged with fear, shared with relatives, or squeezed into a few rooms above a store or beside a road. It may have wallpaper peeling near the stovepipe, a front room saved for company, a hallway smelling of linseed oil and old coats, a kitchen table scarred by knives, homework, and last winter's argument about coal. Everything near the entrance has a job. A nail holds a cap, a chair receives a bag. A shelf keeps gloves, keys, a letter, a receipt, or the small objects that make a household feel organised enough to continue. The threshold also marks a change in voice. Outside, people may have spoken to foremen, storekeepers, customers, relief officers, landlords, teachers, or strangers who had no interest in private embarrassment. Inside, the voice can soften, sharpen, or become carefully neutral. Someone asks how the day was. Someone answers fine, which in the 1930s can mean fine, terrible, unresolved, none of your business, or please wait until after supper. The room accepts this code because families are fluent in their own weather. You take off your coat, and the fabric releases the cold in a small, tired sigh. The kitchen sounds continue. A pan shifted, a cupboard door, water poured, a child being warned not to touch something hot and immediately becoming fascinated by it. From outside, the last light fades beyond porch railings, apartment windows, bare trees, alley fences, farm lanes, or a street where other people are also entering houses with news folded into their clothes. Evening has begun, but not as rest. It begins as sorting. What can be said now? What must wait? What must be hidden? What can be warmed up, stretched, patched, promised, or quietly endured until morning? The front door closes behind you with a small wooden finality, and for a moment the whole household seems to listen to the latch, as if the day might still try to come back in without wiping its feet. You stand near the kitchen stove while heat gathers in uneven waves, and the whole room seems to organize itself around this large iron personality that must be fed, watched, managed, and never entirely trusted. In some homes it is a coal or wood stove, black, heavy, and capable of making the kitchen feel like either a sanctuary or a laundry room in a furnace. In others, there may be a gas range, modern enough to be admired, still demanding enough to remind everyone that progress often comes with knobs. Supper depends on timing, thrift, habit, and the person who knows how long beans can simmer before they become either dinner or a personal statement. The stove warms the room, dries mittens, heats water, threatens tempers, and turns ordinary ingredients into the evening's proof that the household has made it through one more day with dignity and potatoes. You learn quickly that the stove is not background furniture. It is the evening's engine, judge, radiator, kettle, clock, and occasional bully. In a rural kitchen, wood may have been carried and stacked by hands already tired from other work, because warmth in this period rarely arrives without somebody first agreeing to lift it. In a coal-heated home, the scuttle sits nearby with its black, dusty importance, and the fire must be shaken down, banked, stirred, coaxed, and fed like a relative who claims not to be hungry while eating steadily. Ash has to go somewhere. Smoke has to be managed. Drafts have to be understood. A child who opens the stove door for curiosity may be told several things at once, some of them educational and some of them more immediate. If the household has a gas range, the flame may seem almost luxurious, blue and obedient compared with coal or wood. Yet even this modern convenience requires money, pipes, caution, and the ability to turn a knob without behaving as if technology has become your servant. The stove changes the room's social map. The person cooking stands closest, receiving both the honor and the punishment. Children drift near for warmth, questions, and stolen smells, then are sent away because every kitchen has a point at which affection becomes a traffic hazard. Wet socks hang where they can steam faintly. A dish towel dries over a chair. A kettle mutters with the seriousness of a town meeting. The iron surface holds pans that must be shifted from hotter places to cooler ones by instinct, memory, and fingers that have met burns before and would prefer not to renew the acquaintance. There may be soup in one pot, coffee warming in another, water heating for dishes, and potatoes waiting for the moment when tenderness can be achieved without wasting fuel. Fuel matters. Coal costs money. Wood costs labour. Gas costs money and monthly attention. Even heat has a budget, and the stove reminds the room of that fact without needing a voice. In hard times, a stove can make thrift smell almost comforting. Beans, onions, cabbage, bacon grease, cornmeal, leftover gravy, and a bone with more ambition than meat may turn into supper under its supervision. The alchemy is not magical, it is practice. It is the knowledge of how to brown flour in fat, how to stretch soup with water without making it confess, how to warm bread that is no longer fresh enough to be proud, how to cook cheap cuts until they surrender. The person at the stove has to know what can wait, what will scorch, what can be reheated tomorrow, and what must be served before it loses courage. The stove also determines mood. In winter, the kitchen becomes the room everyone gradually invades. The parlour may have better manners, but the kitchen has heat, and heat wins many arguments silently. People stand with backs toward the stove, palms out, coats still on, pretending they came in only for a moment. The stove does not mind being admired, though it will not reward laziness. Damp wool begins to smell stronger. Shoes soften near the edge. The metal ticks and settles. A draught slides under the door and is defeated for a while by iron, flame, and stubbornness. In summer, however, the same stove becomes a domestic enemy. Cooking supper in hot weather can make the kitchen feel as if July has been invited indoors and handed an apron. Windows are opened. Flies consider this a written invitation. The cook glows with heat and moral superiority because everyone wants dinner and nobody else wants to stand there. Through all seasons, the stove is expected to behave like a public utility and a household servant, though it is neither. It has no patience for poor timing, cheap fuel, damp wood, careless draughts, thin pans, or family members who wander in asking when supper will be ready as if the stove has been withholding civilization out of spite. You watch steam rise, smell onions turning sweet in fat, hear a lid rattle, feel the heat tighten the skin of your face, and understand why the stove seems to occupy more emotional space than its size allows. It is not simply where food is cooked. It is where the evening is negotiated. By the time supper reaches the table, the stove has heated the room, tested the cook, dried the socks, warmed the water, and reminded everyone that modern comfort is wonderful. But in the 1930s, it often still has to be shoveled in by hand. You sit down to a supper that's been asked to do more than its ingredients originally agreed to do. A pot of beans, potatoes, cabbage, cornbread, macaroni, gravy, hash, soup, or a careful slice of meat may have been stretched by a mother, grandmother, aunt, or older sister with the quiet skill of someone who could make a meal look calm while negotiating privately with scarcity. The table smells of steam, salt, onions, coffee, hot bread if luck has been generous, and the faint worry of adults pretending not to count portions. No one calls it performance, but supper in the 1930s often requires staging. The serving spoon pauses, plates are filled with fairness disguised as instinct, and the person who cooked may claim not to be hungry, which everyone accepts because the family has agreed not to examine certain sacrifices too closely while eating. The meal may be plain, but plain food is not simple when money has become a stern editor. A bowl of soup might contain yesterday's vegetables, a little barley, a bone borrowed from dignity, and enough pepper to suggest intention. Hash may gather potatoes, onions, scraps of meat, and leftover gravy into one united front. Beans can provide substance, patience, and the sort of reliability many banks fail to demonstrate. Cabbage, cheap and strong-minded, announces itself from the pot with complete confidence. Cornbread, biscuits, or bread slices help fill the plate and quiet the stomach, which is useful because stomachs have never been known for tact. In some households, especially farm homes, there may be milk, eggs, preserved fruit, or vegetables from a garden, though farm abundance during the Depression could be cruelly uneven when prices collapsed, debts rose, drought hit, or cash simply refused to appear. In city homes, food might come from corner stores, markets, relief supplies, church baskets, credit at a grocer, or careful shopping done with coins that had already been assigned jobs before leaving the pocket. The supper table does not need to explain the economy. It displays it in serving sizes. You notice who receives the largest helping. A working man may be given more because tomorrow requires strength, or because the family still performs the old ritual of feeding the provider even when providing has become uncertain. Children may be served first in some homes, watched sharply in others, depending on age, appetite, habit, and whether someone has already eaten at school or a neighbour's. The cook moves with calm authority, but the calm has arithmetic underneath it. How much must be saved for lunch tomorrow? Whether the bread will last? Whether the boarder should be served generously because he pays? Whether the smallest child will notice if her portion is mostly potatoes? Whether the visitor who stayed too long can be fed without being resented in a way manners will not permit? The table may have a cloth if company is present or pride demands it. More often, it may show knife marks, scrubbed wood, oilcloth, mismatched plates, chipped enamel, or dishes collected over years of breakage and survival. A jar may hold pickles. A small dish of butter, margarine, dripping, or jam may be placed where everyone can reach it, but no one should test its generosity. Coffee may be stretched too, brewed weak or made from substitutes in some homes, though anyone who depends on coffee has opinions about being tricked. If there is meat, it carries importance. It may be sliced thin, chopped into something larger, hidden in gravy, or served with the ceremony of a visiting official. Children learn early that asking whether there is more can be dangerous. Not morally dangerous exactly, but atmospherically dangerous. The room may pause. An adult may say, "See if everyone has had some first," which is the polite version of history clearing its throat. Yet supper is not only anxiety, it can also be the warmest hour of the day. People sit close. The lamp or overhead bulb softens the room. The stove heat lingers. Someone tells what happened at school, at work, at the store, on the street, in the field, at the relief office, or during a neighbour's visit that has already improved in the retelling. A joke may travel around the table and come back wearing a better hat. The radio may wait until after dishes, or murmur in the background if the household has relaxed its standards. A mother may scold a child for gulping, then smile into her cup where no one sees. A father may cut his meat smaller than necessary, either for thrift or to make the meal last on the plate, because hunger and pride often dine together quietly. The food may not be fashionable, it may not be abundant, it may not resemble the bright advertisements where smiling women produce perfect meals in kitchens no actual cabbage has ever challenged, but it is warm, it is shared. It says that someone planned, saved, stirred, stretched, and cared enough to bring the day to the table in edible form. You lift your fork and understand that a depression supper is not judged only by flavour. It is judged by whether everyone can leave the table believing there was enough, even if enough had to be persuaded, disguised, and escorted in under gravy. You sit at the table with your elbows under suspicion, your napkin arranged as if civilization itself has come to inspect the meal, and the old rule that manners matter most when there is least to spare. Even in a hard decade, perhaps especially then, many families try to keep supper respectable. Children are reminded not to grab, not to complain, not to reach, not to scrape plates too loudly, not to mention that the gravy is thinner than last week's, and not to ask whether there is more until an adult has decided the household can survive the question. The table may be plain, the plates mismatched, the chairs repaired, but behaviour is meant to hold the room together. Good manners become a kind of domestic wallpaper, covering the cracks without denying the wall exists, and everyone learns that hunger must sit up straight. You may have very little on the plate, but you are still expected to pass it politely, chew quietly, wait your turn, and understand that a family can lose money without surrendering its entire relationship with forks. Respectability is not a small thing in a period when hardship is often visible on shoes, cuffs, cupboards, and faces. Manners become a way of saying that poverty has entered the house, yes, but it will not be allowed to put its feet on the table. A child may be corrected for slurping soup that is mostly water with ambitions. Another may be told to sit properly on a chair that has already survived 3 owners and should perhaps be grateful for use. Someone says, "Please pass the bread," though everyone can see the bread is close enough to seize if society collapsed. It does not collapse. The bread is passed. That is the point. In many American homes, table behavior carries older ideas about class, family discipline, school expectations, immigrant customs, regional habits, and the private fear of being seen as rough. The exact rules vary. A farm supper may be less formal than a middle-class dining room, and a crowded tenement kitchen may have little space for ceremony. But even there, a parent can insist that children say please, wipe their mouths, and not treat supper as livestock training. The table becomes a small classroom where the curriculum is self-control. You learn not to announce dislike too dramatically, because dislike implies options. You learn that what is served is what there is, and what there is has already done its best. You learn that gratitude can be required even when the cabbage has become emotionally assertive. Adults are not always gentle about this. Weariness sharpens correction. A fork clattered too loudly might receive a look. A complaint about beans might receive a short history of people who would be glad to have beans, which is one of the oldest speeches in domestic government, and rarely improves the beans. Yet beneath the scolding is fear. Parents know the world outside the kitchen will judge children by their manners, their speech, their clothes, their cleanliness, and the mysterious ability to appear well-raised even when the raising is being done under financial siege. Table manners are a form of armour, thin but useful. A child who can sit nicely, answer respectfully, and not reach across another plate may be treated better by teachers, neighbours, employers, storekeepers, and relatives with opinions. Manners also prevent the meal from becoming a contest. When portions are limited, rules keep hunger from becoming too honest. Everyone waits, everyone receives. Everyone pretends not to measure. The oldest boy may want more. The younger child may eat slowly to make the plate seem loyal. The adult who cooked may insist she had a bite earlier, a phrase so delicate it should probably be wrapped in tissue and placed with the family china. If a guest is present, the performance improves immediately. Chairs are straightened. The good dish may appear. Children are warned with eyes alone, because eyes can carry entire legal systems across a supper table. The conversation becomes brighter, more careful. Nobody mentions the overdue rent unless the guest is the sort who already knows and has brought pie. In the 1930s, appearances are not vanity alone. They are social survival. A household wants to be seen as decent, orderly, and capable, even when the cupboard privately disagrees. So you fold the napkin, however rough. You use the knife properly, however dull. You say thank you for a meal that has been stretched past reason and still arrived hot. The table holds everyone in place for a little while. Not by abundance, but by ritual. Outside, the depression can close banks, empty pockets, shorten tempers, and make grown people stand in lines they would rather not enter. Inside, for 20 minutes, someone can still correct your posture. There is comfort in that, though children almost never recognize comfort when it is disguised as being told to stop leaning on one elbow. You sit straighter, pass the potatoes, and learn that civilization, in this house, may be patched, hungry, and slightly overcooked, but it still expects you not to talk with your mouth full. You turn toward the radio after supper, and the room quietly rearranges its attention around the glowing dial as if a polished wooden cabinet has become a visiting dignitary. The radio smells faintly of warm dust and varnish, and its voice arrives from somewhere beyond the curtains, carrying comedy, music, serial drama, baseball, advertisements, news, and the careful reassurance of President Roosevelt speaking as if the national crisis has been invited to sit calmly by the fire. In many homes, the radio is not background noise. It is company, theatre, newspaper, concert hall, comedian, politician, and weather oracle, all in one box that must not be touched by children with sticky fingers, chairs turned toward it. Conversation lowers. Someone adjusts the dial with careful household seriousness. The whole family listens, partly entertained and partly relieved that for a while someone else is doing the talking. The set may be a handsome console in a better-off home, standing on the floor with polished wood and a cloth speaker grill like furniture that has learned to speak. In a smaller or poorer home, it may be a tabletop set placed carefully where the cord reaches, admired, protected, repaired when possible, and treated as one of the household's more important residents. Not every family has one, and some listen at a neighbour's, a store, a community space, or through a set acquired second-hand with more hope than warranty. But where radio enters the home, evening changes. The voices arrive without needing a ticket. A band plays from a city you may never see. A comedian delivers a joke into kitchens where the dishes are not done. A drama continues from last week, causing someone to explain the plot to a family member who claims not to care and yet remains suspiciously seated. Children edge closer, forbidden to touch the knobs because tuning is adult work and static is not to be encouraged by amateurs. The dial glows softly, sometimes with station names or numbers too small to matter in the dim light, and the speaker breathes out a mixture of voices, music, crackle, hum, and distance. Static becomes part of the atmosphere. Like weather small enough to live in a box, someone leans forward to improve reception, as if posture might help the signal decide to behave. In the 1930s, radio offers relief from the narrowness of the room, without requiring the household to spend car fare, admission, or shoe leather. It brings vaudeville echoes, big band music, quiz programs, children's adventures, soap operas, detective stories, farm reports, sports, and the news that everyone wants and fears at the same time. It also brings advertising cheerful and insistent, promising toothpaste, soap, cereal, coffee, patent remedies, gasoline, or household wonders to families who may be deciding whether the actual soap can be made to last another week. Advertisements sound brighter than budgets. They enter the room wearing clean clothes and unreasonable optimism. Still, people listen. A product jingle can become part of family memory, which is proof that commerce will sit anywhere if given a chair. The fireside chats are different. When Roosevelt speaks, many households grow quieter in a way that is not entertainment at all. His voice does not fix the roof, fill the pantry, reopen the factory, restore the farm price, or make a landlord forget the date, but it explains, reassures, and sounds personally present in a period when many people feel far from power and much too close to bills. The president arrives through the same box that just carried a comic routine, which is strange if you think about it too long, so most people do not. They listen because the voice is calm, and calm has practical value. Around the radio, the family arranges itself by age, habit, and authority. A father may claim the best chair because he has been working or worrying, and both are treated as reasons. A mother may listen while mending, darning, or folding, because women are often expected to enjoy leisure while continuing to perform evidence against it. Children may sit on the floor, knees tucked, faces bright in the lamp glow, learning jokes they do not fully understand and theme songs they will remember long after the shoes by the door are gone. A grandmother may prefer music. A teenage boy may want sports. Someone wants the cereal. Someone else insists the news is important. The radio holds these disputes with calm wooden dignity, though it can only play one thing at a time, which is inconvenient for democracy. The room feels larger while it speaks. The walls remain where they are, but the imagination gets to travel beyond them. To ballparks, dance halls, city streets, ranch adventures, hotel orchestras, political offices, and fictional parlours where everyone's problems are dramatic but neatly sponsored. Yet the radio also makes the home more communal. People laugh together. They fall silent together. They wait for the next episode together. In a decade when many amusements cost money and many worries arrive free, that shared attention matters. You sit in the softened room while the stove settles, dishes wait, needles move, and the radio voice fills the spaces ordinary conversation has become too tired to occupy. For a while, the household is not alone with itself. It has a wooden cabinet in the corner explaining the world, selling soap, telling jokes, and somehow being treated as the most reliable relative in the room. You watch the evening newspaper unfold with a dry whisper, spreading across a lap or kitchen table like a map of things nobody can afford to misunderstand. The adult holding it may pretend to read casually, but everyone in the room has learned the difference between ordinary reading and the heavy silence that follows a bad headline, a job listing, a bank notice, a crop report, a strike, a foreclosure, or another article explaining that prosperity is expected to return with the confidence of a relative who keeps postponing his visit. The paper smells of ink, street corners, and damp delivery. Children want the comics. Adults want information, reassurance, and perhaps proof that their private worries have at least become public enough to be printed. In a 1930s home, the newspaper is not just news. It is tomorrow arriving early, wearing smudged fingers. The paper may have been bought from a corner stand, delivered by a boy with a canvas bag, borrowed from a neighbour, brought home from work, or rescued after someone else finished it, because news in hard times is too important to be limited by ownership. It passes through the house with a small authority. A father may claim the front page, a mother may glance at prices, household columns, advertisements, recipes, sales, obituaries or notices, and the children hover for the funny pages as if cartoons have been placed in the paper specifically to prove life is not entirely governed by bankers. The pages crackle, leaving ink on fingertips and sometimes on the tablecloth if the household has a tablecloth brave enough for public service. Newspapers of the 1930s carry the depression into the home in installments. Bank failures, New Deal programs, relief debates, farm prices, dust storms, labour unrest, elections, crime reports, international tensions, local bankruptcies, public works projects, and advertisements all sit beside one another, as if the world has been folded into a stack and handed to your family after supper. A headline may mention Washington, another may mention the county. A small notice may list jobs. Those job notices are read with special attention, the way hungry people read menus in a restaurant window. A position for a clerk, driver, seamstress, farmhand, domestic worker, mechanic, or delivery man may attract more hope than it can safely carry. The adult reading may circle nothing, because marking the paper might make hope too visible. Or he may fold the page carefully and say he might go by in the morning, as if the morning is a reasonable person who can be persuaded. The newspaper also delivers advertisements with remarkable cheer. A department store announces bargains. A grocer lists prices for flour, coffee, lard, beans, sugar, and cuts of meat that may be admired more than purchased. A patent medicine promises improvement. A clothing sale suggests that respectability is available at reduced cost. Although reduced cost still has to be paid, household appliances shine in illustrated ads, offering electric ease to homes where the existing lamp cord is already treated like a member of the family. A woman in an advertisement beams beside soap, cereal, canned goods, or a washing machine as if prosperity can be ordered by brand name. The real kitchen listens politely while scraping a pot. Local news matters too. A neighbour's name may appear in a club notice, a school report, a supper announcement, a court item, a marriage notice, a funeral notice, or a column describing who visited whom, with a level of detail modern privacy would find emotionally exhausting. In small towns, the paper can make everyone's business portable. In cities, it can make the vastness of streets and factories feel organized enough to hold. Sometimes the paper is read aloud. Not every adult reads easily, and not every pair of eyes is strong in lamplight, so a headline may become a family event. A child sounding out words receives correction. An adult summarizing politics becomes more confident as the sentence goes on. Someone argues with the editorial, which is safer than arguing with the landlord and considerably cheaper. A cartoon may be shown around. A grim headline may be skipped until after the children are in bed, although children notice skipped things the way cats notice closed doors. The newspaper is also practical after it stops being read. It lines shelves, starts fires, wraps scraps, protects tables, stuffs shoes, catches peelings, covers drafts, and becomes pattern paper for household use. News has a second career in domestic labour, because nothing in the 1930s is allowed to retire merely because it has informed the public. You watch the adult fold the paper at last, perhaps sharply, perhaps gently, perhaps with the quiet resignation of someone who has read enough future for one evening. The comics are surrendered to the children, the job listings remain in memory, and the ink on everyone's fingers proves that the world has entered the room and been handled. Tomorrow has arrived early, yes, but at least it had the manners to come folded. You sit beneath the evening lamp as its warm light settles over the room, touching worn armrests, faded wallpaper, polished table edges, a sewing basket, a chipped cup, and faces that look gentler when the corners of the house are allowed to disappear. If the home has electricity, a bulb may hang from the ceiling or glow under a shade with quiet modern pride. If not, an oil lamp may burn carefully, trimmed and watched, its glass chimney cleaned because light itself costs effort. The lamp does not solve anything. It does not pay the rent, repair shoes, improve the crop, or convince a bank to become more emotionally generous, but it changes the evening's texture. It turns patched cloth into pattern, tired faces into portraits, and ordinary silence into something almost peaceful. Sometimes a household survives the day partly because the room is lit kindly. Light in the 1930s is not as automatic as you may want it to be. In cities and many towns, electric service has become common enough that a switch can feel ordinary, though the bill still arrives with its little reminder that brightness is not exactly free. In rural America, especially before electrification reaches many farms, the evening may depend on kerosene lamps, lanterns, candles, or the fading glow from a stove. A lamp must be filled, trimmed, cleaned, carried carefully, and placed where it can do the most good without being wasted on a corner no one respects. Shadows gather in the ceiling corners, under chairs, behind curtains, along baseboards, and around the edges of framed pictures. The room becomes smaller and more intimate, not because the house has changed, but because the light has chosen favourites. It chooses the table, the hands, the mending, the book, the radio dial, the cheek of a sleepy child, the shine on a coffee cup, the worn spot where an arm has rested for years. It leaves the unpaid bill in half shadow, which may be the closest the bill has come to politeness all day. Under lamplight, poverty can briefly look organised rather than exposed. A patched sleeve becomes visible but softened. A frayed rug becomes pattern. A cracked plaster wall becomes texture. Furniture bought second-hand, inherited, repaired, or simply endured gains the warm dignity of objects that have kept showing up. The family may not be wealthy, but the room can still look held together, and held together is sometimes the highest form of elegance available. Someone may settle near the lamp with sewing because eyes need help. A child may bring homework too close and be told not to ruin his sight, as if sight has not already been challenged by weak bulbs, print, smoke, and the national budget. An older person may tilt a newspaper toward the light, holding it at exactly the angle where the print stops pretending to be ants. The lamp becomes a small centre of authority. Whoever sits closest can see best, which means the chair near the lamp is valuable real estate. It may go to the person mending, the person reading, the adult who paid for the coal, or the child whose arithmetic has become a family emergency. In an oil-lit home, the flame has its own personality. It can smoke if the wick is wrong, flicker if a draft passes, and make the glass chimney cloud over if neglected. It smells faintly of kerosene, warmth, and maintenance. You learn not to jostle it, not to waste it, not to leave it where a sleeve or curtain might become historically memorable for the wrong reason. A lamp is comforting, but it is also fire politely contained by glass and family discipline. Electric light, when present, carries a different kind of pride. It suggests modernity, wires, companies, switches, and the slightly magical idea that darkness can be defeated by touching the wall. Yet even electric light in a modest home may be sparse. One bulb may serve a whole room, a shade may be carefully chosen or patched, a cord may trail where it should not, creating a small domestic trap everyone knows and still steps over. Light reveals class in quiet ways. A wealthy home may have lamps in several rooms, glowing as if every chair has a personal sunrise. A poorer home concentrates brightness where work must happen. The rest of the house waits in practical gloom. Still, the evening lamp gives more than visibility. It gives the family a mood. Voices lower beneath it. Arguments soften or at least become less theatrical. The radio dial glows in companionship. Needles flash briefly as they move through cloth. Steam from a cup rises into the light, making even weak coffee look as if it has intentions. Outside, the street, field, alley or road darkens. Inside, the lamp says the day has not won completely. There is still enough light for homework, mending, reading, a quiet joke, a hand reaching for a cup, and someone pretending not to doze in the chair. You sit in that amber circle and understand that comfort can be humble, measured in watts, wicks, oil, and the mercy of not seeing every crack at once. You stand at the sink, basin, table, or pump with sleeves rolled, hands entering hot water that smells of soap, grease, cabbage, tin, and resignation. The meal is over, which means the evening has produced another job, neatly stacked and slightly accusing. In homes with running water, dishwashing is easier but not effortless. In homes without it, water must be carried, heated, rationed, cooled, and thrown out, because cleanliness in the past often required a small municipal project conducted by one tired person in an apron. Plates are scraped carefully, grease is saved if useful, towels are hung where they might dry before developing opinions. Children may be assigned wiping, which they perform with the solemn injustice of people who believe history has singled them out. The radio may be audible from the other room, proving that entertainment continues for those not currently holding a dishcloth. The dishes are not dramatic, which is part of their power. They wait with the patience of an unpaid account. A supper that took planning, fuel, labour and thrift now returns as plates, cups, forks, pans, spoons, knives, jars, coffee pot, skillet, kettle, and the mysterious extra dish nobody remembers using but everyone agrees is dirty. If the household has a kitchen sink with a faucet, this is a convenience worth appreciating, though the person washing may not pause to admire civilization while scraping dried potato from a plate. If water must be pumped, carried from a well, fetched from a shared source, or heated on the stove, then the dishes begin earlier than the dishes. Someone has to think about water before soap ever touches grease. Hot water is made, not assumed. It is poured carefully, guarded against waste, and used in an order that suggests both cleanliness and battlefield logistics. Glasses or cups may come first, then plates, then utensils, then the greasiest pans last, because dishwater has a social hierarchy and pans know exactly where they belong. Soap may be homemade in some households, bought in bars, shaved, saved, stretched, or used with a thrift that gives bubbles moral weight. A dishcloth, scrub brush, rag, or bundle of steel wool does the clothes work. The water turns cloudy. The hands redden. Rings, if worn, may be removed or turned. Fingernails soften. Steam fogs glasses and windows. The smell of supper returns in altered form. Less inviting now, more administrative. A pan from beans has a particular memory. A skillet that held bacon grease or fried potatoes must be treated firmly but respectfully, especially if the grease is meant to be saved in a tin for future cooking. Nothing useful is washed away casually. Fat can season another meal. Breadcrumbs may go to birds or animals. Coffee grounds may have second uses. Scraps are sorted according to household custom, garden, livestock, trash, or the general principle that waste is a luxury with poor manners. If children help, the entire operation becomes educational in a way children do not appreciate. One washes, one wipes, one puts away, one stands nearby offering commentary until reassigned. A child may be told to dry the plate properly, not wave it in the air like a flag of personal suffering. Another may complain that the towel is too wet, which is often true and never helpful. The adult in charge knows that dishwashing is also supervision. A child at the sink can be questioned about school, behaviour, missing buttons, arithmetic, and whether he ate the last piece of bread without admitting it. The sink is a courtroom with suds. In poorer or crowded homes, the dishes may share space with laundry, bathing water, food preparation, and whatever else the household must accomplish in too few rooms. The kitchen table may become a drying surface after serving as supper table, homework desk, sewing station, and diplomatic conference. Plates are stacked in cupboards that may not match, bowls nested carefully, knives placed where smaller hands should not improve their education, enamelware chips, tin dents. China, if any, is handled with the tension reserved for relatives who lend money. A cracked cup may remain in use because it still holds tea if approached with confidence. The work has rhythm. Scrape, wash, rinse if water allows, pass, wipe, stack. The radio laughs in the next room, or a song rises, or the news begins, and the person at the sink hears everything at a slight distance, which is one of domestic labour's oldest arrangements. Pleasure happens nearby. Work happens here. Yet the sink can also become social. Women talk while washing. Sisters whisper. A mother and daughter share the kind of conversation that occurs more easily when both are looking at plates instead of each other. A father may dry, if household custom permits such modern adventure, and everyone may pretend not to notice the novelty. The kitchen warms with steam and lamplight. Outside the window, darkness presses against the glass. Inside, the last traces of supper are being erased so tomorrow can have a clean surface on which to make its own demands. When the final pan is set aside and the dishwater is carried out, drained, or thrown where it belongs, the kitchen seems to exhale. The dishes are done, which means nothing else will happen tonight except mending, homework, baths, stove tending, lunch planning, floor sweeping, and several other forms of rest. You sit beside the lamp with the mending basket in your lap, surrounded by socks, shirts, hems, elbows, knees, buttons, patches, thread, and the quiet understanding that clothing does not stop being useful merely because it has begun to complain. In the 1930s, garments often have careers longer than some politicians. A dress can be turned, let down, cut over, passed along, protected, reworked, and finally promoted to rag status with full household honours. Socks are darned over wooden eggs or careful fingers. Buttons are saved in tins. A child's trousers receive patches so visible they might as well be named. The needle moves in and out with a small, steady rhythm, and thrift becomes both virtue and necessity. Nobody calls it sustainability. They call it Tuesday, and the sock is expected to be grateful. The basket itself may be wicker, cloth, a box, a drawer, or any container that has accepted the household's textile disappointments. Inside are the small failures of daily life. A stocking run that could not be ignored, a torn pocket, a missing button, a shirt cuff frayed from work, a hem drooping with fatigue, a child's knee opened by play, a sock heel gone thin enough to question its identity. In a prosperous decade, some of these things might be replaced sooner. In the 1930s, replacement is not the first answer. First comes repair, then adjustment, then disguise, then reclassification. Only after a garment has exhausted several appeals does it become scrap, quilt piece, cleaning rag, bandage cloth, doll clothing, or patch for a garment still pretending to be respectable. You thread the needle in lamplight, which requires patience, eyesight, and a tolerance for being briefly mocked by a tiny hole. The thread may be bought, saved, matched carefully, or chosen from what exists, because exact colour agreement is admirable but not always invited to supper. A patch can match if luck is present. More often, it announces honesty. Children may dislike visible patches because children are deeply concerned with public dignity, while also sliding on their knees through dirt as if fabric grows naturally from cupboards. Mothers and older sisters know this contradiction well. They mend anyway. A patched knee may be reinforced from the inside, stitched with care, and sent back into service with warnings that will be ignored by recess. Socks require their own technique. A darning egg, a smooth bottle, a light bulb if risk and desperation have become acquainted, or a hand slipped inside the sock can hold the heel open while thread crosses the hole in patient little bridges. It is slow work, soothing if you are not too tired, maddening if the hole is large enough to suggest the sock has entered retirement without permission. A good darn is nearly woven. A hurried one is a small grey nest. Either way, the foot will find it tomorrow and form an opinion. Dresses and shirts carry social stakes. A woman's dress may be lengthened for a growing daughter, shortened to look newer, turned so worn fabric hides better, trimmed with a fresh collar, or remade from an older garment with enough imagination to pass in polite lighting. Flour sacks and feed sacks may become aprons, underthings, children's clothes, towels, or household cloth, especially when manufacturers begin printing them in cheerful patterns, because even commerce can recognize that women are turning packaging into wardrobes. A man's work shirt may receive elbow patches, collar reversal, cuff repair, and the stern expectation that it continue looking employable. Clothing in this period is not only warmth and modesty, it is respectability, job possibility, school dignity, courtship, formal visits, public standing, and proof that a household is keeping itself together. A missing button can become a problem larger than its diameter. That is why buttons live in tins, jars, boxes, and old envelopes, saved from dead garments like useful bones. You may sort through them, hearing them click against one another, choosing the closest size while knowing no one will notice unless you choose badly. The mending basket also holds memory. A baby garment kept too long, a father's shirt worn soft at the neck, a dress from better days, too good to cut and too worn to wear, a stocking that belonged to someone now grown. Fabric remembers bodies. It remembers work, school, dances, funerals, errands, kitchens, rain, sweat, soap, and the particular way one person always wears out the same elbow. As you mend, the household continues around you. The radio speaks, a child reads, someone scrapes a chair, the stove ticks. Your hands keep moving because stillness is allowed only if it is useful. Women especially are expected to turn sitting into production, so leisure arrives with a needle attached. A man may repair a harness, tool, shoe, chair, or radio part and be praised for handiness. A woman mends entire wardrobes and is praised mostly when nobody can see the repair. That is the secret aim of so much domestic labour. Success looks like nothing happened. You pull the thread tight, knot it, bite it or cut it, smooth the cloth and place the garment in a pile of things returned to usefulness. It is a small victory, not glorious, not permanent, but real. Tomorrow the sock will walk again, the button will hold, the patch will face the world, and the household will continue its long conversation with scarcity, one stitch at a time. You bend over a school book at the kitchen table while adults move around you with lowered voices, and the evening becomes a strange mixture of arithmetic, spelling, stove heat, pencil shavings, and worries you are not supposed to understand but absolutely do. The book may be handed down, the pencil short, the paper used carefully, and the light not quite strong enough for anyone's eyes, but lessons still matter. Parents who have had fewer chances than they wanted may watch education with fierce hope, even while needing children to help with chores, errands, younger siblings, coal, water, or whatever task the house has quietly assigned them. A radio program tempts from the parlour. The smell of supper still lingers. Someone tells you to concentrate. You do, mostly, while the adults speak in phrases like if work comes, if the bill waits, if the weather holds, and other forms of grammar not taught in school. The kitchen table is not an ideal desk, but it is available, which in a busy household makes it official. A few minutes ago it may have held plates, gravy, bread and elbows under suspicion. Now it holds a slate in some homes, lined paper in others, a spelling list, a reader, a geography book, arithmetic problems, ink, if the family trusts both the child and the table, and perhaps an eraser worn so low it has become more suggestion than tool. School supplies are not casual. A pencil is used until it becomes a splinter with ambition. Paper is written on carefully, sometimes on both sides if possible, because waste belongs to children in theory and to household budgets in fact. You sound out words while an adult corrects pronunciation from the stove. You carry numbers down a column while someone counts coins nearby, with an entirely different level of consequence. Arithmetic on the page may ask how many apples remain if some are sold, while the adults are quietly asking how much flour remains if payday does not. The two lessons are related, though no teacher has written them on the same page. In the 1930s, schooling varies widely by place, race, class, and family need. Some children attend well-equipped town schools. Others sit in rural one-room schools where one teacher manages several ages, a stove, ink, recitations, and the emotional weather of boots drying near the wall. Black children in segregated communities often face underfunded schools, short terms, second-hand materials, and long walks, while still carrying the same hopes and burdens of learning. Farm children may miss school during planting, harvest, illness, weather, or family crisis. Older children may leave early to work, help at home, or contribute wages. Education is praised as a ladder, but ladders are less helpful when the roof is leaking and someone needs you to hold the bucket. Still, the desire is real. Parents may believe that books can lead a child away from the hardest forms of labor, or at least give better tools for facing them. A mother may insist on homework because she knows the world will not be generous and would like her child to meet it with spelling. A father may ask about school in a gruff voice, unable to help with algebra but deeply invested in the idea that the child should know more than he was allowed to know. An older sibling may supervise, half proud and half irritated, because authority is never more enjoyable than when borrowed briefly from adults. The household competes with the lesson. A baby cries. A pan needs drying. Coal must be brought in. A sibling whispers answers that are not correct, but are offered with confidence. The radio in the next room carries laughter at the exact moment you are expected to understand fractions, which seems unfair even by depression standards. You may be asked to mind a younger child while reading. You may recite spelling words while peeling apples if there are apples, or potatoes, which are less educational but more available. Chores keep arriving, carrying buckets, younger siblings, fuel, errands, animals, paper routes, dishes, and mending into the same hour as lessons. Nobody gives it a tidy name. They call it helping, and helping has a way of arriving before the page is finished. Yet there are small pleasures. A correct answer earns a nod. A teacher's praise is repeated at supper. A new word feels like property no one can repossess. A map opens a world beyond the town, farm, street, or apartment. You trace rivers, states, countries, and rail lines, with a finger that still smells faintly of soap or pencil lead, imagining distances the family budget cannot travel. Your eyes grow tired in the lamplight. The chair is hard. Someone says finish that page before bed, and you stare at the page as if it has personally delayed sleep. Around you, adults keep talking in lowered fragments. Rent, work, shoes, coal, doctor, tomorrow. Their words move behind your lesson like a second text. You are learning history while living it, though for now history looks like arithmetic, a dull pencil, and a grown-up voice saying one more problem. You bend closer to the page, form your letters carefully, and discover that education in this house is not a quiet path upward. It is a kitchen table negotiation with hunger, chores, lamplight, and a radio comedian who has chosen the worst possible time to be funny. You face bath night with the grave awareness that cleanliness has become a household campaign involving kettles, basins, towels, soap, modesty, patience, and hot water that must be distributed as fairly as a court decision. In a comfortable home, there may be an indoor bathroom, which everyone appreciates in theory and complains about in practice when the water runs cold. In poorer or rural homes, bathing may happen in a washtub near the stove, with water carried, heated, reused, and guarded from drafts that arrive like personal enemies. Children are washed in order of dirt, age, or whoever can be captured first. Soap stings, towels scratch. Someone objects to ears being inspected. The room smells of steam, metal, laundry soap, damp hair, and family negotiations. By the end, everyone is cleaner, no one is relaxed, and the floor has also participated. Bathing in the 1930s is shaped by plumbing, fuel, income, season, modesty, and the ancient household truth that water is heaviest when someone else needs it. If your house has a bathroom with a tub, it may still not feel like the effortless private sanctuary later advertisements will pretend everyone has always enjoyed. The water may be heated by a tank that runs out with the emotional timing of a rude guest. The pipes may knock, the room may be chilly, and the tub may have claw feet, enamel chips, or a curtain that clings with unnecessary intimacy. If there is no indoor bathroom, then bath night moves into the kitchen or a back room, because the kitchen has heat, water, and the grim willingness to become every room at once. Kettles are filled and set on the stove. A galvanized tub is dragged out, its metal sides ringing against the floor with the ceremony of a small domestic trial. Towels are gathered, which means the good towels are protected, unless someone important is visiting, or a child has done something unusually muddy. Soap appears, sometimes store-bought, sometimes homemade, sometimes used carefully until it becomes a slippery little relic. A cake of soap may serve hands, faces, dishes, laundry, and moral instruction, depending on the household standards and the day's dirt. The first person into the water receives the closest thing to luxury. After that, cleanliness becomes a relay event. The order may be arranged by age, gender, dirt, modesty, or maternal strategy. Babies and little children often come first because they can be captured, washed, dried, and placed somewhere safe before they find a way to become dirty again in the same room. Older children argue, negotiate, vanish, reappear, and claim they already washed yesterday, as if hygiene were a subscription service one could cancel. Adults may wash later, quickly, privately if privacy exists, or in pieces at a basin when full bathing feels like too much production for an evening already crowded with chores. A basin bath can be respectable, efficient, and deeply humbling. Face, neck, hands, underarms, feet, and whatever else the situation, weather, and modesty permit. The household knows how to do practical cleanliness without turning it into a spa, which is good because the spa has not been invited and could not afford the coal. The water itself is watched. Too hot and someone complains. Too cold and everyone complains. Too little and the operation fails. Too much and someone has to carry it out again afterward, because bathwater does not leave by good intentions. In homes without drains nearby, dirty water may be lifted in buckets and thrown outside, down a drain, or wherever the household custom permits. This gives the person carrying it plenty of time to reflect on the romance of the past. Steam rises into lamplight, windows fog, hair is scrubbed with determination. Ears are inspected because ears have been quietly representing childhood lawlessness all week. A child howls that water is in his eyes despite having placed his entire head in the path of history. Another stands wrapped in a towel, shivering theatrically, as if the family has invented suffering specifically for him. The adult washing remains brisk, because sympathy slows the process and the water is already cooling. Clean nightclothes are brought near the stove or warmed if someone is kind and fuel allows. Damp hair is combed, often with snarls that seem to have signed a long-term lease. The floor is wiped after splashing, though the floor may feel it has earned a private apology. Bath night also carries ideas about respectability. Children must go to school clean. Adults must appear decent in public. A family may have little money, but soap and effort declare that neglect has not been allowed to take over. Cleanliness is not merely health. It is pride, discipline, and proof that the household can still keep order when the decade keeps leaving mud at the door. By the time the tub is emptied, the towels hung, the soap rescued, and the last damp child sent toward bed, the room has cooled and steamed and argued its way into victory. Everyone smells faintly of soap, wet hair, stove heat, and exhaustion. The household has achieved cleanliness through engineering, patience, and several accusations of unnecessary earwashing. You gather near the warmest part of the house as evening deepens, because heat in many 1930s homes is less a background comfort than a limited resource with social consequences. The kitchen may remain warm after supper, while bedrooms wait upstairs or down the hall with the emotional welcome of a cellar. A coal stove, wood stove, furnace, or fireplace gives what it can, and the family arranges itself accordingly. Chairs inch closer, socks dry nearby. Someone warns a child not to stand too close, then stands too close. The smell of coal, ash, wood smoke, wool, damp shoes, and hot iron mingles with the fading scent of food. In winter, the house may have warm islands and cold territories, and everyone knows which rooms belong to which season. The evening teaches cooperation, because when heat is scarce, selfishness becomes visible by the stove. The warmest room becomes a kind of domestic capital, and everyone makes small, polite attempts to invest in it. A chair is moved a little nearer. A child settles on the floor with suspicious innocence. An older person claims a place because age has rights and also because knees have become weather instruments. Someone opens the stove door briefly and is scolded because heat, once escaped, does not return with an apology. In a home with central heating, perhaps by coal furnace or steam radiator, comfort may travel more widely, though not always evenly. Radiators hiss, clank, sulk, and sometimes overperform in one room while another room preserves the climate of a root cellar. In less equipped homes, the stove or fireplace may be the main source of evening warmth, and the household lives accordingly. The kitchen becomes the sensible republic. The parlour may be prettier, but pretty rooms have lost arguments to practical temperatures since the beginning of furniture. Fuel is never just fuel. Coal must be bought, delivered, stored, shoveled, carried, shaken, and cleaned after. Wood must be cut, split, stacked, and kept dry, which is a full biography before it ever becomes flame. Kerosene costs money, gas costs money. Even warmth arrives with a receipt or a blister. During the Depression, saving fuel is not merely thrift. It is survival with ashes. Doors are closed to keep heat in. Curtains are drawn against drafts. Rugs, if present, help the floor feel less personally opposed to human feet. Cracks around windows are stuffed, patched, or ignored with the brittle dignity of households that have already done what they can. Children are told to put on another sweater, which is the traditional answer to every question involving indoor temperature and budget. A coat may remain on indoors longer than manners prefer. Hands wrap around cups. Feet seek the stove. A baby is kept close. The family learns the geography of warmth with precision. Near the stove is summer. 3 steps away is autumn. The hallway is November. The bedroom is an expedition requiring courage, socks, and confidence in blankets. Going to bed may mean leaving the human circle of heat for sheets so cold they seem to have been stored outdoors for legal reasons. To soften the shock, some families warm beds with hot bricks wrapped in cloth, heated flat irons, warming pans, hot water bottles if available, or the reliable method of sending a child in first and pretending this is not strategy. The child, naturally, recognizes the injustice but lacks a committee. Heat also shapes behavior. People linger in the kitchen after dishes because the kitchen is alive with the stove's remaining warmth. A father smokes near it. A mother mends. Children sit too close until their cheeks redden. Someone's socks hang over a chair, stiff at first, then limp, then steaming faintly with an honesty no one requested. Wet mittens make the room smell of wool and outdoor trouble. Boots are placed where they can dry without scorching, though boots and stoves are both strong personalities and do not always negotiate well. In farm homes, cold enters differently, through porches, mudrooms, barns, and the necessity of stepping outside for chores even after supper. In city apartments, warmth may depend on a landlord, a radiator, coal money, or neighbours on the other side of thin walls conducting their own thermal experiments. Some rooms become too hot, some too cold, and nobody is quite satisfied, which proves the system is domestic. Yet there is comfort in gathering. The family near the heat becomes quieter. The lamp glows. The stove ticks, settles, and occasionally breathes through its draught. The day's rough edges soften in the shared warmth. Conversation drifts. Someone tells a small story. Someone falls halfway asleep while insisting they are only resting their eyes. The warmth is imperfect, smoky, dusty, uneven, and expensive, but it holds people together in a way abundance sometimes forgets. You shift your chair an inch closer, pretending not to. Someone notices. Of course they notice. In a 1930s evening, moving closer to the stove is not a private decision. It is a public statement with knees. You enter the parlour, sitting room, front room, or best room, depending on family vocabulary and furniture ambition, and immediately understand that this space is both used and protected, ordinary and ceremonial, comfortable and faintly supervised by the furniture. There may be an upright piano no one plays confidently, a sofa with worn arms, framed photographs, a clock, a family album, lace, antimacassars, a plant trying to survive indoor weather, and chairs arranged for company that may or may not come. In some homes, the parlour is where the radio lives, so the room must now perform modernity. In others, it is saved for guests, which means the family sits elsewhere while the best chairs maintain their mysterious virtue. The parlour reveals what a household wants to be seen as, even when the kitchen knows the truth. The room may not be grand, but it carries grand intentions. It is where a family places the objects that say, we are respectable, we have a past, we know how to receive visitors, and we are not simply a collection of people eating beans near a stove. A framed wedding photograph may hang slightly crooked but emotionally important. A portrait of a relative may watch from the wall with the expression of someone who would have had opinions about modern table manners. A clock ticks with more confidence than the bank. A crocheted doily protects a table from the scandal of being touched directly by a lamp. Antimacassars, those small protective cloths placed over chair backs and arms, guard upholstery from hair oil, wear, and the general human tendency to lean on things. They make a chair look dressed for company, which is useful because company may arrive before the household has finished pretending it is always ready. If the home is modest, the parlour may contain furniture gathered across years, a hand-me-down rocker, a repaired side table, a sofa with springs that remember better times, a cabinet displaying dishes too good for ordinary appetite, and a rug whose pattern has become a shared household memory because the middle has faded into diplomacy. Nothing is accidental. Even if everything is worn, the arrangement is purposeful. The room is a public face. Children know this and behave accordingly, or are reminded before behaving accordingly. Do not jump on the sofa. Do not touch the album with dirty hands. Do not put your feet there. Do not breathe on that, if the adult mood is severe enough. In some families, the front room is used daily because there is no spare room to preserve from a distance, and the radio, lamp, sewing, reading, and visiting all happen there. In others, especially where older customs or middle-class respectability remain strong, the best room may be guarded for callers, holidays, funerals, courting, formal visits, or the kind of company who makes everyone sit straighter. The family may be cold in the kitchen while the parlour remains pristine, which is one of civilization's stranger bargains. During the Depression, keeping a best room can become more symbolic than practical. Even if money is short, the room insists that dignity has not been sold, pawned, or used for kindling. A plant in the window tries to support this argument by staying alive. The plant may not be fully committed, but effort counts. If the radio has been placed in the parlour, the room changes. The old formal space becomes a broadcasting chamber, and everyone must negotiate between respectability and comfort. Chairs that once faced guests now face a wooden cabinet speaking from Chicago, New York, Cincinnati, or somewhere else that sounds both glamorous and extremely far from the mending basket. The parlour becomes less stiff. People gather there nightly. The best room hears jokes, serials, speeches, music, advertisements, and children whispering when they should be quiet. It is still supervised by the furniture, but the furniture has been forced to accept mass entertainment. If there is a piano, it may provide music, ambition, or guilt. Someone may have taken lessons. Someone may still practice a little. Someone may only play familiar songs, popular tunes, or one waltz badly enough to be family tradition. Sheet music rests in a bench. Dust gathers on keys that are opened when guests come, because a piano nobody plays can still imply culture if approached with confidence. The parlour is also where courtship may happen under family surveillance sharp enough to cut ribbon. A young man sits in a chair chosen by adults. A daughter sits where she can be admired, but not too privately. Conversation remains wholesome, which is easier when everyone in the house can hear it. The room knows how to host neighbour visits, holiday greetings, sewing circles, solemn news, photograph albums, and the careful offering of coffee if there is coffee to offer. Yet the parlour is not only performance. In lamplight, it can be beautiful. The worn arms of chairs shine where hands have rested for years. The family photographs hold still while everyone else ages and worries. The clock keeps a slow heartbeat. A lace curtain moves slightly in the draught. The room carries memory, aspiration, and the gentle fraud by which all homes claim to be more orderly than their kitchens can verify. You sit carefully, because the chair has a public reputation. The cushion sags, the radio hums, the plant leans towards survival, and the parlour continues its quiet work of making hardship look as if it has been invited in only for a formal call. You hear a knock at the door just when the dishes are not finished. The children are half washed, the good chair has laundry on it, and the household has relaxed into the dangerous belief that no one else will witness it. A neighbour, cousin, church acquaintance, landlord, delivery boy, or friend appears in the doorway with news, gossip, a borrowed item, a question, or the simple human desire not to sit alone. In many communities, evening visits are part of social life, especially when telephones are limited, money is short, and entertainment often walks over from next door. Hospitality must be assembled quickly. A cup is found, a chair is cleared, The room is made respectable at emergency speed. Everyone becomes slightly more formal, including the child who was just accused of tracking mud through the house and now must behave as if raised by diplomats. The knock itself changes the air. Before it, the house was private enough to be untidy, tired, warm, damp, and honest. After it, the house becomes a stage with very little rehearsal time. Someone says, "Who can that be?" in a tone that already contains 3 guesses. A mother wipes her hands on her apron and glances at the room the way a general might inspect a battlefield and decide which hill can be saved. A child is ordered to move the basket, not that basket, the other basket, quickly. A newspaper is folded, a towel disappears from the chair. The good cup is considered and perhaps rejected because hospitality must be balanced against inventory. The visitor steps in with cold air, street smell, damp coat or porch dust, and the household begins the delicate ritual of seeming pleased. In the 1930s, dropping by is not automatically rude. It can be normal, necessary, and even kind. Many homes do not have telephones, and those that do may share party lines, limit calls, or treat the telephone as too formal for casual neighborly business. People come over because a borrowed iron is needed, a child has carried a message, a family has heard news, a relative is in town, a job rumor is circulating, or someone simply cannot sit alone with worry any longer. Hard times make people dependent on one another in practical ways. A neighbor might lend flour, sugar, coffee, a tool, a pattern, a pan, a little coal, a few eggs, or the name of someone hiring. Another might arrive to repay the same, carrying a parcel wrapped in paper and pride. The transaction is often dressed as conversation, so no one has to stand naked in need. A woman may say she just happened to have extra, and everyone understands the effort that sentence is making. Gossip also travels by evening visit, and gossip in a hard decade is not merely entertainment. It is community intelligence wearing a hat. Who has work, who lost work, who is sick, who got relief, who is moving west, who had a letter from a son, who should not be trusted with borrowed tools, who has a room to let, who is behind with rent, who has been seen at the grocer asking for credit. Some of this information is tender, some is sharp. All of it helps people place themselves in the social weather. The visitor may be welcome, but welcome has limits. If the landlord appears, the room changes differently. Chairs do not become warmer. Voices become careful. A rent conversation at the door can turn an evening brittle. If a delivery boy arrives, the household counts coins. If a church acquaintance or club woman calls, respectability becomes suddenly expensive in posture. If a friend appears with actual good news, everyone brightens with relief that does not need to be rationed. Hospitality depends on what the cupboard allows. Coffee may be offered if there is enough, or something weaker may be made to sound intentional. A plate of cookies would be lovely, but many evenings produce only conversation, and conversation has the advantage of being refillable. The visitor is asked to sit. If the parlour is presentable, the visit may move there. If not, the kitchen must perform dignity with the dishpan nearby, which it does bravely. Children listen from corners, absorbing adult phrases and pretending not to. They are told to say hello, then sent away, then somehow remain within hearing distance because childhood is mostly surveillance with dirty cuffs. The adults talk in layers. Weather first, because weather is safe and always available. Then prices, work, school, health, roads, relatives, repairs, crops, rent, radio programs, neighborhood news, and the sort of cautious confession that arrives after enough minutes of ordinary words have softened the doorway. An evening caller can become a burden when everyone is tired, but also a mercy when the house has grown too full of its own thoughts. The visit proves that private hardship is not entirely private. Someone else knows. Someone else is also stretching, patching, waiting, calculating, and pretending that a cup of weak coffee is exactly what the occasion required. At last the visitor rises, because leaving is its own ceremony. Coats are gathered, news is repeated, thanks are exchanged. Someone says come again, and sometimes means it entirely. The door closes. The room relaxes back into itself, slightly colder, slightly rearranged, and carrying one new piece of information to worry over. The dishes are still not done, but now they have heard everything. You pass a plate to the boarder, lodger, relative, or extra person whose presence helps pay rent, share costs, or simply reflects the fact that the Depression has made household walls more flexible than anyone expected. In many 1930s homes, especially in cities and towns, families take in boarders, double up with kin, or share space because private life is expensive and square footage has opinions. The extra person brings money, company, inconvenience, habits, smells, stories, and the subtle rearrangement of every domestic routine. Supper conversation changes. Bedrooms are negotiated. The bathroom, if there is one, becomes a scheduling problem with towels. Children learn to lower their voices around someone who is not quite family and not quite stranger. The house earns a little, loses a little privacy, and pretends the arrangement is normal because normal has become unemployed. The boarder may be a single working man, a widow, a cousin from the country, an uncle between jobs, a teacher, a clerk, a travelling salesman, a factory hand, a young woman working in a shop, or someone who arrived as temporary help and has now become part of the furniture's long-term plan. Taking in boarders was not new in American life, but the Depression made shared housing feel less like an arrangement and more like a strategy. Rent must be paid. Food costs money. Rooms that once held sewing, storage, or a child's private kingdom can be converted into income with a bed, a washstand, a hook, a towel, and a silent family agreement not to discuss the inconvenience too directly. If relatives move in, the boundaries are even more complicated. Family is supposed to be welcome, but welcome still snores, eats, borrows the newspaper, and uses the good chair. In a doubled-up household, every room develops more than one purpose and too many witnesses. The parlour becomes a sleeping room at night. A dining room becomes a bedroom if the table can be shifted. Children share beds, swap corners, or sleep under quilts with siblings whose elbows are clearly overrepresented in the family. A cot may appear. A trunk may become a dresser. A suitcase may remain under the bed for months, quietly suggesting that the guest is still temporary, although the dust disagrees. Meals become more formal in some ways and less private in others. At supper, the boarder must be served enough to feel respected, especially if he pays, but not so much that the family secretly resents the arithmetic. A paying lodger may receive a steadier portion than a growing child thinks fair, and the child may discover that economics can sit at the table and ask for gravy. Conversation must be managed. Family quarrels are softened, private worries are postponed. The mother of the house may perform hospitality while calculating costs with terrifying accuracy. More bread tomorrow, less butter tonight. Coffee stretched, laundry increased, sheets washed, towels accounted for. A boarder brings rent, but rent often arrives wearing socks that need washing. Privacy changes shape. The hallway becomes public territory. A closed door means something, but not always enough. A washstand, chamber pot, basin, or shared bathroom requires schedules, modesty, and the ability to ignore sounds no one wished to know about another person. In homes with indoor plumbing, mornings and evenings may involve a cue that tests civility. In homes without it, the shared routines of washing, dressing, and getting ready must be choreographed with curtains, politeness, and strategic timing. The family learns not to leave personal things everywhere. Or rather, the family continues leaving them everywhere, and then experiences consequences. Children are warned not to bother Mr. So-and-so, not to touch his razor, not to look in his suitcase, not to ask why he is not married, and not to repeat what he said about the president. Naturally, these instructions make him fascinating. The boarder has his own habits. He may read at night, cough, come home late, leave early, whistle, smoke, tell stories, eat quickly, avoid conversation, or become too comfortable in the chair nearest the stove. He may be lonely. He may be proud. He may be ashamed to be living in someone else's room. He may also be a blessing, bringing cash, repairs, errands, news, or a sense of the outside world. The household may grow fond of him despite itself. Shared hardship often creates attachments no one planned, because people who pass the potatoes every evening eventually become part of one another's weather. Yet the arrangement is always slightly unstable. A lost job can end the board money. A new job can carry the lodger away. A family disagreement can make the room feel smaller by several feet. A daughter's privacy may worry parents. A son may resent losing space. A grandmother may object to everything and be right about half of it. The house adjusts by ritual. Knock before entering. Keep voices down. Fold bedding early. Do not leave stockings over the chair. Serve supper at the same time. Make small talk when necessary. Pretend the walls are thicker than they are. In the 1930s, independence is admired, but dependence is everywhere, dressed as lodging, kinship, economy, and common sense. You pass the plate, smile politely, and understand that the home is still a home. Only now it has an extra appetite, an extra pair of shoes by the door, and one more person pretending not to notice that everybody can hear everybody else. You watch the father, uncle, grandfather, older brother, or household man sit after supper with his hands still marked by work or by the absence of work, and you notice how much of the evening gathers around what he does not say. In the 1930s, masculine pride often has to share a chair with unemployment. Reduced wages, seasonal labour, closed factories, failed crops, relief applications, or the humiliating arithmetic of not being able to provide as expected. He may read the paper, listen to the radio, repair something, smoke quietly, polish shoes, check a tool, or stare at the stove as if warmth might answer a question. The family gives him space, sympathy, irritation, or all three depending on the day. The silence is not empty. It is full of bills, dignity, weather, jobs, and the terrible responsibility of appearing steady while the floorboards know better. In many households, the man of the house has been taught, directly or indirectly, that his worth should be visible in wages, a steady job, a paid rent, shoes for children, coal in the bin, and meat often enough that nobody has to treat it like visiting royalty. The Depression makes that old expectation cruelly complicated. Work may disappear without asking permission. Hours may be cut. Wages may shrink. A factory gate that once opened every morning may now stand closed, or open only to some. A farm may produce food and still not produce cash. A skilled man may spend a day walking from place to place, asking after work with a face carefully arranged to show willingness but not desperation, because desperation is honest and therefore socially inconvenient. When he comes home, the house must absorb all of that without always naming it. You can see it in his shoulders, you can hear it in the way he clears his throat before answering a question. He may sit with the newspaper spread before him, not quite reading, following columns of print while his mind stands in line somewhere else. The children may want him to play, explain, fix, decide, laugh, or lift them into the air, because children do not always understand that worry has weight. Sometimes he does these things anyway. Sometimes he cannot. A tired man can become gentle, silent, sharp, absent, or suddenly funny in a way that startles the room back into breathing. The household learns to read him as carefully as it reads the weather. A good mood may be protected like a lamp flame. A bad mood may be walked around, not always from fear, sometimes from mercy, sometimes from simple fatigue. There are many kinds of fathers and household men, of course. Some are tender, some are stern, some are unreliable, some are heroic only in the quiet sense of showing up again after another difficult day. Some women are the main earners. Some households have no father present at all, because death, separation, migration, abandonment, work travel, or other facts have rearranged the table. But where a man has been expected to provide and cannot do so steadily, the evening can become a theatre of restraint. He may repair a chair, because repairing something is better than sitting inside helplessness. He may sharpen a knife, fix a latch, polish shoes, oil a tool, or take apart a radio part with the grave expression of someone giving usefulness a place to sit. These little repairs matter. They say that skill remains even when wages do not. They give the hands a problem with screws, leather, wire, wood, or metal, which can be more manageable than a problem with banks. Smoking, if he smokes, becomes another small ritual. Smoke drifts toward the ceiling and joins the lamplight, making thought visible in a way that would be rude if thought did it alone. If he listens to the radio, he may seem soothed by baseball, comedy, music, or a presidential voice explaining national trouble with unusual calm. The rest of the family keeps moving. The mother measures leftovers. A child does sums. Someone dries dishes. Life continues around his chair, because domestic life has very little respect for private collapse. Yet the family may quietly adjust to him. A child lowers a voice. A wife postpones a question about money until the room is softer. An older daughter notices a tear in his cuff and says nothing until she can mend it later. A son watches his hands and learns complicated lessons about pride that no schoolbook will explain. The man may not say he is afraid. He may not say he feels ashamed. He may not know how to describe the strange humiliation of wanting to work in a country full of work that somehow cannot become a job. Instead, he says the weather may turn. He says he will ask tomorrow. He says maybe the road crew is hiring. He says pass the paper. Around him, the house holds its breath and then lets it out slowly. You watch him shift in the chair, hear the floorboard answer, see the lamplight catch the roughness of his knuckles, and understand that silence can be a full sentence when money is short. The evening does not ask him to explain everything. It only asks him to remain steady enough for supper, warm enough for the children, and hopeful enough to try again in the morning, which is a great deal to demand from a man and one tired chair. You see the mother, grandmother, aunt, or older sister move through the evening with the steady invisibility of a person whose work becomes noticeable only when it stops. She serves, clears, wipes, listens, remembers, saves, scolds, soothes, mends, plans breakfast, checks the baby, watches the fire, measures leftovers, tracks the bill due Friday, and perhaps sits down only after the chair has nearly forgotten her. The 1930s home may talk about the breadwinner, but the evening often belongs to the person who makes scarcity appear organized. She knows which child needs shoes, which neighbor might lend, which store allows credit, which jar still has beans, which shirt can survive another patch, and which worry should not be spoken before bedtime. Her labor has no time clock, no applause, and no clear ending. It simply changes rooms and picks up a dish towel. You may notice her only in motion, crossing from stove to table, from table to sink, from sink to cupboard, from cupboard to crib, from crib to mending basket, from mending basket back to the stove because the fire has opinions. If she sits, it may be on the edge of the chair, as if the chair is a stop rather than a destination. Her hands remember everything. They know the weight of the flour sack, the feel of a child's fevered forehead, the exact texture of dough needing more water, the soft weakness of fabric about to tear, the sound of a jar lid sealing, the coin left in a purse, the letter folded too often, the shape of a shoe that no longer fits the foot it is supposed to protect. In many households, women's evening labour is the machinery behind ordinary life, though it is rarely described with machinery's respect. A washing machine, if present, is admired. A woman doing laundry by hand is expected to be grateful for soap. A refrigerator is called modern. A woman planning food across 3 days is called sensible, and asked what is for breakfast. The unfairness does not always arrive as cruelty. Often it arrives as custom, which is cruelty wearing an apron and acting surprised when noticed. She may have spent the day cooking, cleaning, sewing, shopping, taking in laundry, doing paid work, caring for children, helping on a farm, stretching credit, or managing the small emergencies that never become stories because they were solved too early. At night, she becomes the household's memory. She remembers that the youngest needs a note for school, that the oldest has worn through a sock, that the boarder likes coffee stronger than the family can afford, that the rent man may come Friday, that the good towel must not be used for bath night, that there is 1 egg left and it must become something more persuasive than 1 egg. She also manages emotion. If the father comes home silent, she reads the silence. If a child asks too directly whether there is enough money, she answers without opening the whole cupboard of fear. If a neighbor calls, she makes the house look ready. If a relative writes asking for help, she feels the letter before she answers it. The emotional work sits under the visible work like a second floor nobody mentions because they are already walking on it. Food is one of her main negotiations with the decade. She may thin soup, save drippings, turn leftovers into hash, press stale bread into service, stretch coffee, make preserves last, and speak of plenty in a tone that asks the table to cooperate. A small failure can feel enormous. A scorched pan, a broken jar, a spilled cup of milk, a child's torn coat, or a bill forgotten until too late may carry more emotional force than the object itself deserves. One mistake can cost time, money, food, dignity, or all four, and dignity is already being asked to live on reduced portions. Yet she is not simply tragic. She may be funny, sharp, affectionate, impatient, proud, practical, and capable of cutting through nonsense with one glance across the table. She may laugh with another woman at the sink, trade recipes that are really budget reports, and find pleasure in a clean shelf, a sleeping baby, a good radio song, a jar filled properly, or 5 minutes when nobody asks where something is. The house runs through her decisions. She knows what can be postponed and what cannot. She knows when to scold and when to let a child keep the last bit of jam. She knows which worry should be shared, which should be softened, and which should be folded away until after morning coffee. If another woman in the family helps, the labour may be divided, taught, argued over, and passed down with the dish towel. Girls learn early by watching, then by doing, then by being expected to know. Boys may help too, depending on the household, though society often allows their helpfulness to be treated as assistance while hers is treated as destiny. At last, when the dishes are stacked, the stove checked, the leftovers covered, the socks set aside, the baby quieted, and the house less demanding, she may sit. The chair receives her as if surprised. She may rub her hands, lean back, listen to radio, or close her eyes for a moment before remembering one more thing. In the 1930s home, rest does not arrive and announce itself. It peeks in shyly, sees her standing again, and decides to come back another evening. You open the pantry, cupboard, cellar shelf or icebox and look at tomorrow arranged in jars, tins, sacks, leftovers, wrapped paper, a heel of bread, a little lard, apples going soft, beans, flour, coffee, preserves, and the stubborn hope that something can become breakfast if treated respectfully. Food storage in a 1930s home is not merely domestic organisation, it is strategy. A modern electric refrigerator may exist in some better-off homes, but many households still depend on an icebox, a cool cellar, careful shopping, preserving, and judgment sharpened by necessity. Nothing is casually thrown away. Leftovers have expectations placed upon them. Bread becomes toast, crumbs, pudding, dressing, or moral evidence. A covered dish may contain supper, lunch, or a mystery protected by wax paper. You close the door gently, because tomorrow has been inspected and should not be startled. The pantry is where the household conducts its quiet accounting without using a ledger. Shelves tell the truth in jars and gaps. A full jar of beans is reassuring. A half sack of flour is both useful and already in decline. A tin of coffee may be lifted and shaken with the seriousness of a banker examining reserves, although the banker has probably not been asked to make one scoop taste like two. Sugar is watched. Lard is valued. Salt is steady. Canned tomatoes, peaches, corn, pickles, preserves, or relish may stand in rows if summer labour has been successful, their glass sides glowing softly in lamplight or cellar dimness. In farm homes, preserved food represents not abundance alone, but heat, lifting, peeling, boiling, sealing, sweating, and the hopeful belief that the lids have done their duty. In town and city homes, shelves may reflect careful shopping, relief supplies, credit at the grocer, a neighbour's kindness, a bargain found at the market, or a meal plan built around what could be afforded rather than what anyone wanted. The icebox, if present, has its own rituals. Ice must be delivered or bought. The drip pan must be emptied, which is exactly the kind of chore everyone remembers only after it has become interesting. Food must be placed with judgment, because cold space is limited and does not expand for sentiment. Milk, butter, meat, leftovers, and anything delicate are given priority. A covered bowl goes in carefully. A plate is balanced. Wax paper is smoothed over something that might yet become lunch. The icebox smells of cold metal, damp wood, milk, onion, yesterday's supper, and an optimism that may or may not be justified. In better-off homes, an electric refrigerator carries modern pride, humming quietly as if it personally defeated spoilage. But even there, food is not wasted lightly. Depression habits teach people to keep, reuse, and inspect. A refrigerator may be modern, but the person opening it still knows the price of eggs. Leftovers are the pantry's leading characters. They do not lie around as evidence of excess. They wait for assignment. A spoonful of peas can join soup. Cold potatoes can become fried potatoes. A little meat can be chopped into hash, tucked into gravy, stretched with rice, or treated as flavour rather than main event. Bread too stale for sandwiches may become toast, crumbs, pudding, stuffing, or something with a respectable name if enough cinnamon is present. A heel of cheese, if there is cheese, can influence a sauce beyond its size. Apples going soft must be used before they begin making private plans. Nothing simply exists. Everything is on a path toward a meal, a substitute, a stretch, a rescue, or the compost heap if the household has a garden and the item has truly failed. The pantry also reveals class and region. A rural family may have home-canned goods, smoked meat, root vegetables, eggs, milk, or garden produce, while still lacking cash for shoes, taxes, or tools. A city family may have access to markets and stores but less space, fewer ways to grow food, and a sharper dependence on wages or credit. A black family in the South, a Mexican-American family in the Southwest, an immigrant household in a northern city, a Dust Bowl family moving west, and a middle-class family trying to maintain appearances may all face different cupboards and different risks. The rule is not that everyone has the same pantry. The rule is that everyone understands food as planning. You do not open a cupboard casually in such a home. You consult it. You ask whether oatmeal can last to Thursday, whether beans should soak tonight, whether the heel of bread can be saved for breakfast, whether the good jam should wait for Sunday, whether the boarder's lunch needs more than politeness, whether the children will notice if supper repeats with a new name. Names help. Soup becomes stew if thicker. Leftover stew becomes filling if wrapped in dough. Fried mush becomes breakfast if sliced with confidence. Rice pudding makes old rice respectable. A casserole can introduce ingredients that met only because poverty was good at networking. The person in charge of the pantry becomes a quiet diplomat between appetite and supply. You stand there in the lamplight or cellar cool, listening to the house settle behind you, and realize tomorrow is already asking questions from inside jars. The cupboard is not empty, not full, not hopeless, not generous. It is simply honest, which is why everyone closes it gently. You approach the telephone, if the home has one, with the awareness that this object is not casual furniture but a public instrument of private consequence. It may sit on a hallway table, hang on a wall, or be absent entirely, leaving messages to travel by neighbour, letter, errand, or hope. Where telephones exist, calls are brief, because money, party lines, manners, and household curiosity all stand nearby. A ring can make the whole room pause. Someone answers with a formal voice, as if the caller may be the bank, a doctor, a relative, an employer, a wrong number, or destiny wearing a wire. On a party line, privacy is partly theoretical, because other ears may be attached to the same system with the innocence of a cat beside cream. The telephone connects the home to the world while reminding everyone that the world might be listening. In the 1930s, not every household has a telephone, and the absence of one shapes life almost as much as the presence of one. Without it, news travels by walking, shouting from a porch, sending a child with a message, writing a letter, stopping at a neighbour's house, or waiting until someone happens to pass along the right street. A doctor may be summoned through a neighbour who has a phone. A job notice may arrive too late because it had to travel by feet. A family member in another town becomes reachable only through letters, telegrams if urgent and affordable, or calls made from someone else's line. Where a telephone does sit in the house, it often occupies a place of ceremony. It may be black, heavy, and upright on a table, or mounted on the wall with a receiver that must be lifted as if handling a household responsibility. You do not lounge into a call. You answer properly. You speak clearly. You do not tie up the line. You do not shout unless Aunt Clara is on the other end and has declared war on audibility. The ring itself is sharp enough to command attention. Conversation stops. Heads turn. A child may run toward it and be told not to touch it with a speed suggesting the telephone has legal authority. The adult answers, perhaps giving the number, the family name, or a careful hello. Everyone nearby immediately pretends not to listen, which is the most obvious form of listening humanity has ever developed. Calls cost money in many cases, especially long-distance calls, and time on the line is not treated as endless. A local call may still be brief because manners require it, party lines discourage lingering, and the household may not want private matters floating through the hall. A long-distance call is an event. The operator may be involved. Someone may say, "Can you hear me more than once?" which is both a technical question and a family emotion. If a relative is ill, a son has found work, a daughter has arrived safely, a debt must be discussed, or a funeral must be arranged. The telephone carries importance into the room, with the receiver cord stretched like a nerve. Party lines add another layer of comedy and danger. Several households may share the same line, each with its own ring pattern, and everyone is expected not to listen to other people's calls. This expectation has the structural strength of wet paper. Some neighbours behave honourably. Others develop sudden, unexplained interest in the receiver whenever it clicks. You may hear a faint breathing, a click, a pause, or the silence of someone trying to become furniture. Private news can travel faster than intended when several families share a wire and at least one has weak principles and excellent hearing. People learn to speak cautiously. Names are softened. Details are avoided. Important matters may be discussed in phrases that sound harmless to strangers and perfectly clear to family. If you need the doctor, the telephone is a blessing. If the bank calls, it is less charming. If an employer rings, the whole room may tighten. A possible job offer can make the receiver feel heavier than iron. A wrong number can produce irritation out of proportion to its importance, because the household had already spent 3 seconds imagining disaster or deliverance. Young people may want to use the telephone for courtship, which alarms adults because romance through a wire seems both modern and dangerously unsupervised. A girl may say very little and mean a great deal. A boy may ask a question with more throat-clearing than language. A parent may linger nearby performing unnecessary dusting. The telephone makes distance shorter but embarrassment wider. It also exposes class. A family with a private line enjoys a level of conversational luxury others may envy. A family using a neighbour's phone must ask, wait, hurry, and sometimes conduct personal business under the neighbour's wallpaper. A family with no phone at all learns patience because technology has not yet entered its hallway. You set the receiver back in place carefully when the call ends. The room releases itself depending on the news. If it was good, everyone asks at once. If it was bad, everyone waits. If it was merely ordinary, the telephone resumes its pose of dark importance, sitting there as if it has not just made the entire household stop breathing. For a device meant to carry voices, it is remarkably good at creating silence. You sit around the table with cards, checkers, dominoes, a puzzle, a spelling game, a homemade toy, a story, or the kind of family entertainment produced when money has gone out for the evening and left imagination in charge. Not every household has the same leisure, and not every evening has the energy for cheer, but many families make amusement out of what is available. Radio programs, sing-alongs, reading aloud, guessing games, mending turned social, a deck of worn cards, or children inventing dramas with buttons, string and furniture. The room smells of lamp heat, paper, dust and cooling stove iron. Adults may join in or merely watch, tired but grateful for laughter that does not require admission. Someone cheats badly at checkers. Someone accuses a sibling of rule violations with courtroom intensity. For a little while, poverty has to wait its turn. Evening amusement in a 1930s home is often a masterpiece of low expense and high negotiation. Going out may cost money, and even when there are picture shows, dances, club events, school programs, ball games, or neighbours to visit, not every family can spare the coins, the clothing, the transportation, the time, or the energy. So the house becomes its own small theatre. A table becomes a game board. Chairs become audience seating. A radio program becomes a national event in miniature. A deck of cards, soft at the corners and slightly suspicious from years of use, can provide rummy, euchre, bridge, solitaire, old maid, or whatever game the family knows well enough to argue about. Rules vary by region, family, and memory, which means every card game contains at least one adult who insists that the correct version was established long ago and everyone else has been living in error. Checkers requires less equipment but no less drama. The board may be printed, homemade, or improvised. Pieces may be buttons, bottle caps, beans, or checkers from a set still missing one red piece since before anyone can remember. A child moves too quickly. An older sibling claims victory too loudly. An adult corrects strategy with the weary satisfaction of someone who has found one corner of life, still governed by diagonal movement. Dominoes click against the table with pleasing authority. A jigsaw puzzle spreads across the surface and immediately begins hiding one edge piece out of spite. A spelling game turns education into competition, which is dangerous because schoolwork becomes more attractive when someone else might lose. Homemade toys carry the household's thrift into childhood imagination. A spool becomes a wheel, a button becomes treasure, a paper bag becomes a puppet if handled with confidence. String becomes a trap, harness, telephone line, fence, boundary, or reason an adult will later trip. Children can create elaborate worlds from scraps because scraps are what the era has made available, and also because children have always been better than adults at accepting poor materials and assigning them kingdoms. Adults may listen half amused and half relieved that nobody has asked for anything bought. Reading aloud is another possibility. A library book, school reader, newspaper serial, magazine story, adventure tale, joke column, or borrowed novel can draw the room together. In homes where books are few, a single story may be read more than once until everyone knows the good parts and still pretends to be surprised. A strong reader gains power. A poor reader is encouraged, corrected, and sometimes rescued by someone who cannot bear the suspense of a difficult sentence. Music may enter if there is a piano, fiddle, harmonica, guitar, mouth organ, or simply voices. People sing popular songs, old songs, work songs, sentimental songs, nonsense songs, or whatever the radio has lodged in everyone's mind without asking permission. The singing may be good. A family member with confidence and limited pitch can change the atmosphere of a room. The radio, of course, is the grand assistant in affordable amusement. Comedy programs bring laughter into houses that have not purchased a ticket. Serial dramas cause people to hush each other. Music programs let the parlour imagine itself briefly as a dance hall, though the rug may object. Children may act out what they hear, giving furniture more dramatic careers than it requested. Yet even at play, the household's worries do not vanish entirely. A father may laugh but keep one ear on tomorrow. A mother may play cards while mending. Someone may stop mid-game to check the stove, settle the baby, or remember that beans need soaking. Pleasure is woven through duty, not separated from it. That makes the laughter softer but also sturdier. It is not the laughter of people who have forgotten hardship. It is the laughter of people who have asked hardship to stand aside while someone tries to crown a checker. Neighbours may join, bringing a deck of cards, a story, gossip, or simply themselves. In crowded homes, boarders or relatives may be included, willingly or not, because shared rooms create shared evenings. A game gives people a way to sit together without discussing money directly, which is one of its great civic achievements. You look around the table, see lamplight on hands, buttons used as pieces, a pencil keeping score, a child guarding a move with absurd seriousness, and an adult smiling despite fatigue. The entertainment is small, homemade, and easily interrupted. It costs almost nothing, which is fortunate, because that is exactly what the budget had set aside for joy. You move toward bedtime through a house that makes noise in layers. Floorboards creak, pipes knock, someone coughs, a baby stirs, the stove settles, a clock ticks, a bed frame complains, and the radio signs off or fades into adult voices too soft to follow. Children are sent to bed with instructions, warnings, last drinks of water, and the usual dramatic belief that sleep is an injustice invented by parents. Bedrooms may be shared by siblings, relatives, boarders, or anyone the household must fit under its roof. Privacy is thin, blankets are negotiated, cold sheets are endured. A hot brick, warmed flat iron, extra quilt, or pile of coats may become comfort in winter. The house does not become silent. It becomes lowered, like a lamp turned down, still full of breathing, worry, and someone remembering a chore too late. Bedtime in a 1930s home is not a single event. It is a migration conducted by tired adults and resistant children through narrow halls, dim rooms, cooling floors, and furniture that announces every movement to the county. The youngest may be carried, already heavy with sleep and still somehow holding a toy, rag doll, blanket corner, or mysterious object no one wants to investigate by lamplight. Older children are sent under their own power, which means they travel slowly, stop often, ask questions, remember thirst, discover urgent emotional attachments to objects ignored all day, and attempt one final legal appeal against darkness. Someone says wash your hands. Someone says brush your teeth. If toothbrushes and tooth powder are available and the household has not decided that tonight the battle is already too large. Someone says use the chamber pot or go now. because no adult wants to hear a small voice in 20 minutes announcing a preventable expedition. In homes with indoor plumbing, the bathroom becomes a narrow checkpoint of towels, cold tile, toothpaste, soap, and siblings pressing one another toward impatience. In homes without it, bedtime involves basins, pitchers, outhouses, chamber pots, and the kind of brisk practical modesty that later generations will not put in advertisements. Nightclothes may be patched, flannel, cotton, handed down, too short at the wrists, or warm near the stove if someone kind is thinking ahead. A child may protest that the nightshirt is scratchy, the bed is cold, the blanket is unfairly distributed, the sibling is breathing too loudly, or the entire arrangement violates personal liberty. Parents, having survived the day, answer with the calm of people who have heard every constitutional argument against sleep. Beds in this household may not be private little islands. 2 or 3 children may share one. A younger child may sleep with an older sibling for warmth. A boarder may occupy a room that once belonged to storage. A grandmother may sleep behind a curtain or in a room that also holds trunks, boxes, and seasonal things. In crowded houses, beds are not merely furniture, they are nightly negotiations with space. Who gets the wall side? Who kicks? Who steals blanket? Who talks after lights out? Who has cold feet and considers another person's shins a public heating service? In winter, the mattress may feel hard with cold at first, the sheets sharp, the air near the floor unfriendly. A hot brick wrapped in cloth, a warmed flat iron, a hot water bottle or an extra quilt can make the difference between sleep and a small private expedition to the Arctic, though no one calls it that because geography homework is already finished. In summer, the problem reverses. Rooms may be close, airless, mosquito-bothered, and full of children who keep turning over as if the bed has become a skillet. Windows may be opened if safe, curtains stirred, screen doors latched, and the household made uneasy by every sound outside. Safety is part of bedtime too. Doors are checked, lamps are lowered, matches are put away, fires are banked or watched. A child may be reminded not to touch the lamp, not to swing feet against the bed frame, not to whisper after being warned, not to wake the baby, and not to claim that a shadow in the corner has become a person unless prepared to have the shadow inspected by an irritated adult. The house keeps making sound after everyone is assigned to rest. Wood contracts. A radiator knocks. The stove breathes. A clock ticks with unreasonable confidence. The radio may fade out with a final tune, a station announcement, or static that sounds like distance itself being folded for the night. Adults continue below or in the kitchen, their voices softened by walls. Children listen because childhood has excellent hearing when not asked to obey. A bed frame creaks, someone coughs, a sibling asks if you are asleep, proving by the question that neither of you is. Slowly the house lowers. The day's jobs do not vanish, but they step back. You pull the blanket closer, feel a cold patch with one foot, and learn that bedtime in the 1930s is not exactly peace. It is simply the moment when everyone agrees to stop proving they are awake. You lie in bed or sit just out of sight while adult voices continue in the kitchen, their words lowered but not low enough to keep worry from travelling through walls. After children are sent away, the evening often reveals its second face. Bills are discussed, rent is counted, work is hoped for. Relief is considered with pride wounded and necessity standing firm. A letter from family may be read again. A doctor bill may be folded and unfolded. A mother says something practical. A father says something brief. Someone mentions a neighbour who lost the farm, a cousin heading west, a factory shortening hours, a landlord waiting, or a storekeeper who might extend credit. The child is not meant to understand, but houses are poor at secrecy. The dark teaches listening, and worry has very clear diction when spoken near a stove. You may not catch every word, but you catch enough to know that adulthood has continued after bedtime without permission. The voices below you or beyond the door sound different now. They are not the voices used for scolding, serving, laughing at the radio, thanking a neighbour, or telling children that everything is fine in the tone adults reserve for things that are not entirely fine. These voices are lower, flatter, more careful. They move around facts as if facts are furniture in a dark room, and everyone has already bruised a shin. Money is counted in coins, envelopes, scraps of paper, memory and hope, Rent is due, coal is low, shoes are needed. The store bill has grown. A doctor may have to be paid, and the doctor, unlike a bedtime story, cannot be shortened for convenience. If the family is on relief or considering it, the conversation can carry a special strain. Public help may be necessary and still feel humiliating to people raised to treat self-reliance as a moral chair everyone should sit in upright. The New Deal, local relief offices, charitable aid, church support, county help, work programs, and neighbours' kindness may all matter deeply, but accepting help can still bruise pride. Adults may discuss it in half sentences. We may have to. Not unless, just until, if they ask, if he can get on that crew. Such phrases drift through walls and teach children that grammar can hold shame without naming it. A letter from elsewhere may sit on the table, read once aloud and then again silently. A cousin may be heading west after drought, debt, or failed crops. A brother may write from a city, saying work is scarce but perhaps better than home. A married daughter may need money. A son may send a little home or ask for a little back. Migration enters the kitchen as paper folded at the creases. So does illness. A cough, a fever, a pregnancy, a weak heart, a bad tooth, an injury at work, or a child who needs glasses can change the whole budget's posture. Health is not separate from money. It stands beside it with a bill in one hand. You hear an adult say maybe it can wait, and even from bed you sense that waiting is not always wise, only cheaper. Work dominates everything. A man may have heard of a road project, a factory opening, a farm needing hands, a shop taking applications, or a neighbour who knows someone, which is one of the era's more delicate forms of hope, without the comfort of certainty. A woman may consider taking in more laundry, sewing for pay, cleaning, cooking for others, keeping a boarder, or stretching already stretched labour until it becomes almost transparent. Older children may be mentioned too. Could he deliver papers? Could she help Mrs. So-and-so? Could school wait? No one says these things lightly. Children are future, but they are also extra hands in a house where the future has not been paying its share. The adult conversation is not always sad. Sometimes there is humour, sharp and low. Someone makes a joke because without jokes the numbers become too proud of themselves. Someone says the landlord can wait if the landlord has learned patience, which everyone knows he has not. Someone laughs softly and then stops. The laugh matters. It proves the adults are still themselves under the arithmetic. You may lie stiff under the quilt, pretending not to hear because being discovered listening would bring correction, and also because hearing too much makes the darkness larger. The sounds of the house become part of the conversation. A spoon set down, a chair scraped, paper folded, stove shaken, cup placed carefully, someone sighing through the nose instead of the mouth because even worry has manners. You learn that adults protect children imperfectly, not because they do not care, but because walls are thin, money is thinner, and fear moves through both. Later, when the voices stop, the silence may be more powerful than the words. You do not know what has been decided. Perhaps nothing. Perhaps tomorrow has been given several instructions it may ignore. You close your eyes while the kitchen lamp still glows under the door or down the hall, and you understand that sleep is supposed to come now, even though the grown-ups have left worry awake to finish the accounts. You step onto the porch, stoop, back step, or open doorway as the evening air cools and the house releases some of its heat, noise and worry into the dark. In warm weather especially, the porch becomes an extra room, cheaper than a parlour and more honest than a formal visit. Neighbours pass. Chairs scrape. A screen door sighs. Someone fans themselves with a newspaper. The smell of dust, cut grass, tobacco, rain, laundry, coal smoke, or city pavement rises into the night. Conversation moves slowly because nobody has much extra energy, and speed would seem impolite to the fireflies. The porch lets the household be private and public at the same time, watching the street, greeting the familiar, avoiding the overly familiar, and pretending for a while that sitting outside counts as going somewhere. In the 1930s, the porch can be one of the home's most useful spaces because it does not require heating, lighting, admission, or enough space inside for everyone's elbows. In a city, it may be a stoop, fire escape, front steps, shared landing, or open window where people lean out into the evening and become part of the street's low conversation. In a small town, it may be a proper porch with chairs, a railing, a swing if luck has been generous, and a view of sidewalks, yards, dust, trees, or the road where neighbours pass slowly enough to be recognised and evaluated. On a farm, it may be the back step or porch facing fields, barns, chickens settling, a pump, a woodpile, and a sky wider than the day's worries. The form changes, but the purpose is similar. The house has been too hot, too crowded, too smoky, too full of supper, children, dishes, radio voices, adult worries and stove heat. Outside offers air that has not yet been assigned a chore. You sit down and feel the chair give slightly under you. It may be a wooden rocker, a cane chair, a straight chair dragged out from the kitchen, an upturned crate, a step, or the edge of the porch itself. Comfort is not guaranteed, but it is improved by the fact that nobody is asking you to wash a pan. The screen door opens and closes behind people with a long spring sigh, one of the official sounds of warm weather. A child pushes it too hard and is corrected. Someone lights a cigarette or pipe. Smoke lifts into the evening, joining the smell of grass, dust, damp earth, automobile exhaust if there is traffic, horses in some places, coal smoke in others, frying from a neighbour's kitchen, and laundry cooling on a line. Porches make neighbours possible without making them unavoidable. A person passing by can call out without coming in. Good evening. Hot enough for you. Any word from your boy. Here they're hiring over at the plant. Looks like rain. Those little phrases carry bundles of social information, tied neatly so no one has to open them too quickly. A neighbour may pause at the gate. Another may continue walking because not every greeting is an invitation. Children may be allowed to play nearby until dark gathers them back. They catch fireflies in jars, draw in dust, chase one another, roll hoops, toss a ball, or conduct small local governments with rules rewritten every 3 minutes. Adults watch without seeming to, which is one of adulthood's quieter skills. The porch also lets people cool down emotionally. Inside, the room may hold the rent conversation, the hot stove, the child's complaint, the visitor's news, the boarder's habits, the dishwater, the newspaper, and the entire day pressing against the walls. Outside, those things loosen a little. The dark makes everyone less visible, and therefore slightly less required to perform. A mother may sit with her apron still on, which means she is resting but not formally off duty. A father may lean back and say very little, which outside can feel less heavy than it did indoors. An older person may rock slowly, measuring time by boards, breath, and memory. Teenagers may linger at the edge of the porch, hoping to be seen by someone passing and not seen too closely by family. Courtship can begin in such spaces with careful glances, porch visits, and conversations supervised by windows that pretend not to be listening. In apartment neighbourhoods, stoops and sidewalks create a shared evening room for people who cannot afford privacy in generous quantities. Women talk from steps. Men gather near corners or railings. Children move between households. News travels, so do opinions. The whole block becomes a kind of outdoor parlour, less polished but better informed. Yet porch life is not available equally or safely to everyone. Race, region, neighbourhood, segregation, policing, poverty, and local custom shape who can sit, walk, gather, or linger without danger or suspicion. A porch can feel free and still have invisible boundaries. Still, when safety and weather allow, there is deep comfort in sitting outside while the day cools. The house behind you glows faintly through curtains. A lamp burns, dishes are stacked. Someone inside laughs at a radio line. Somewhere down the street, another screen door sighs. You fan yourself with the newspaper, not reading it now, just using tomorrow's troubles to move a little air across your face. For a few minutes this counts as leisure, travel and climate control, which is an impressive career for one tired porch chair. You make the final round through the house before bed, touching the ordinary things that must be trusted until morning. The stove damped down, the lamp turned low, the door latched, the windows checked, the dishes stacked, the leftovers covered, the shoes placed where they can be found, the schoolbooks gathered, the mending set aside, the radio quiet, the ashes contained, and the family arranged in beds like a small republic of exhaustion. This last check is practical, but it is also emotional. It says the household has survived another day of the 1930s with enough food, warmth, soap, patience, and borrowed optimism to continue. The rooms look softer now, less like evidence and more like shelter. In the darkness, the furniture stops performing respectability. The clock keeps watch. The house settles around its people, and for a few hours even the unpaid bills must whisper. The final check belongs to whoever cannot fully sleep until the house has been persuaded to behave. Often it is the mother, though it may be a father, grandmother, older child, aunt, uncle, or anyone whose mind keeps a list after everyone else has surrendered to pillows. You move quietly, not because the house is silent, but because quiet becomes the last courtesy of the day. A board creaks under your foot and you pause, as if apologizing to every sleeper. The kitchen is first, because kitchens hold both comfort and danger. The stove must be safe. If it is coal or wood, the fire is banked or damped according to habit, ash checked, draft adjusted, and anything flammable moved away with the seriousness of people who know houses are built of work and can be lost by carelessness. If it is gas, knobs are checked. If a lamp has been used, the flame is lowered or put out. Matches are placed where children cannot conduct scientific research before breakfast. The kettle is moved. The iron, if used, is cold enough. The dish towel is not too near the stove. These are small acts, but small acts are how households survive. You cover leftovers with a plate, cloth, wax paper, or whatever the cupboard allows. A bit of bread is wrapped. The coffee pot is set for morning, or at least rinsed enough to avoid judgment. Beans may be soaking. Oatmeal may be measured. A lunch pail may wait near the door, empty or half prepared, because morning is always less generous with time than evening promised. The pantry door is closed. The icebox is checked so it does not stand open, wasting cold, that expensive little form of weather. You look at the table, cleared now of supper, homework, games and argument, and see only wood, oilcloth, a crumb, a pencil, a thread, some proof of the day refusing to vanish entirely. In the front room, the radio is off. After hours of voices, jokes, music, advertisements, news and distant reassurance, the wooden cabinet has gone mute and looks almost innocent. Chairs sit where people left them. A newspaper rests folded, perhaps not neatly. The mending basket waits with tomorrow's work already nested inside. A lamp leaves a faint warmth in its shade. Photographs hold their expressions in the dark. If there is a boarder, his door is closed. If relatives sleep in the parlour, the best room has become practical at last, which is good for the room's character. You check the front door. The latch matters. A chain, bolt, hook, or lock is tested, depending on what the house has. Windows may be lowered, raised a crack for air, or secured against weather, insects, street noise, or worry. Curtains are drawn. On a farm, there may be one more thought for animals, weather, tools, gates, or water. In town, one more glance toward the street. In an apartment, one more listen to the hall, where other households make their own late sounds. Safety at night is never abstract. It is doors, lamps, embers, windows, babies, medicine bottles, loose rugs, and the certainty that someone will step on the toy left in the dark if it is not moved now. Bedrooms are checked gently. Children sleep in tangled positions no adult could choose voluntarily. One has kicked off a blanket. Another has stolen too much. A small hand lies open on the sheet, having released whatever argument it carried all day. An adult may pull a quilt higher, move a shoe, take away a book, or pause at a bedside longer than necessary because sleeping children make hardship look briefly negotiable. The grown-ups sleep differently, more lightly, one ear listening for coughs, weather, trains, dogs, footsteps, or the baby. The house is not rich, it may not be secure. It may contain debt, patched clothes, shared beds, thin walls, and a pantry that requires imagination. But tonight, it has held. That matters. The final check is a quiet inventory of survival. Enough heat left. Enough food for morning. Enough soap. Enough fuel. Enough strength, perhaps. Though strength is the item most often assumed to be in stock. You turn down the last light, and the room loses its edges. The stove ticks. The clock continues its small official duties. Outside, the porch darkens. Inside, the house exhales around its sleeping people. Tomorrow will arrive early, carrying its usual paperwork of hunger, weather, work, school, bills and dishes. But for now, the household has closed its case. Even the stove-side chair seems relieved to be off duty. And now you can let the house grow quiet. You have spent this long, soft evening inside a normal American home in the 1930s, among stove heat, coal dust, lamp glass, dishwater, mending baskets, thin gravy, shared beds, careful newspapers, borrowed chairs, porch air, radio voices, cold sheets, saved buttons, covered leftovers, and all the small domestic rituals that tried to turn uncertainty into order before morning came back asking questions. You have seen how much work lived inside the word home, how much planning could hide inside a pantry shelf, how much pride could sit at a table with very little food, and how many people quietly carried worry without making it the loudest thing in the room. It was not a simpler time, not really. It was slower in some ways, harder in many others, and full of little negotiations with water, heat, money, privacy, manners, and shoes that had been asked to continue far past their natural confidence. But there was tenderness there too. There were hands pulling quilts over sleeping children, neighbours bringing news through the door, mothers making enough from almost enough, fathers sitting silently but still sitting there, children doing arithmetic under lamplight, and families finding laughter in cards, radio jokes, porch talk, and the serious public business of not wasting anything useful. So, tonight, as you return to your own room, your own bed, your own light switch, your own running water, your own soft blanket, you can feel quietly grateful without looking down on them. They did what people do. They adapted. They stretched. They mended. They shared. They kept going. And now the stove is safe. The dishes are stacked. The radio is still. The porch is dark. The last lamp has gone low. And the old house has finally settled around its sleeping people. Let your own day loosen now. Let the room soften. Let tomorrow wait politely outside the door. Rest well, sleep deeply, and good night.